Rated T for Teen.
Empire Earth was a fantastic game, and it was big. And we had to make our game epic, and we had to make it as good as it could be, better than any other RTS game out there. The things we had to focus on were making history come alive more, so we put more unique units in it from different civilizations over time.
One of the things I wanted to do was make sure that we gave players more control over a large scope of action. A lot of RTS games have the camera a little bit low to the ground, and it works well up to a certain point, but once you get to having a large army and a large empire, just controlling all that becomes pretty difficult. And we wanted to push the envelope in terms of the amount of empire that you're controlling in this kind of game, and at the same time make that easier to do.
We put in a stronger artificial intelligence opponent that gives more replayability to the game. We've done things such as make the environment come alive with weather that actually impacts gameplay. Tropical rainstorms ground your airplanes and change your strategy on the fly. We have built the map out of different territories that mean you have to go out and take ground, which has been part of real warfare since the beginning of time, but has never appeared in real-time strategy games until Empire Earth 2. We've added depth, we've added strategy, and we've kept the epic flag of Empire Earth flying high. Empire Earth 2 is Epic Conquest Evolved. It's got more breadth, more depth than any other RTS game out there. There are 14 unique civilizations in Empire Earth 2, divided up into 4 different regions: Mesoamerican, Western, Far Eastern, and Middle Eastern. Every region has its own look and has its own unique powers and units in it. There's over 350 different combat units in Empire Earth 2, which is 33% more than in the original Empire Earth. We've got unique units for every civilization, such as the German Teutonic Knights, the Egyptian Royal Elephants, and the Chinese Dragon Archers. Empire Earth 2 has over 275 different unique buildings in it, 80% more buildings than in the original Empire Earth. Every region has entirely different buildings from every other region for unique looks for Mesoamerican, Middle Eastern, Far Eastern, and Western civilizations. There are unique buildings that you can build as wonders such as the Brandenburg Gate. You can build special pyramids and special temples that give you particular powers unique to each civilization. When we were designing Empire Earth 2, our goal was to come up with a bunch of features that made everyone who played the game say, why the hell didn't they think of that before?
Some of the innovations we came along with for that is one has to do with just basic camera controls, that the game zooms out further if you want it to. More importantly, some of the other things we did that were a little more challenging were to, for instance, make a picture-in-picture window, where you can not only have a second view on the action, but there are a variety of controls for that.
So you can set bookmarks on different regions, on different units, and the picture-in-picture will follow that unit around. It will be able to oversee a different region of the game. But the most important thing is that you can give orders to units in the picture-in-picture. You can select things in the picture-in-picture. I use it to launch nuclear missiles from silos. I use it to do my trading by sending trade carts across the map. What it makes easier for the player is that you don't have to scroll around the map in order to do things that involve 2 different locations on the map. It's simply a brilliant feature.
There's also a full-screen map where you can get a complete view of the entire battlefield from a obviously distant perspective, but it's useful for many things, including one of the features we put in, which is the citizen manager.
In most real-time strategy games, you have to grab each individual citizen and send them to their resource or task.
And what they really want to just be taken care of is, I want 20 guys chopping wood, 10 gathering food, 15 getting gold.
You have the option of going to the Citizen Manager screen or using the fast panel in your main user interface, and it will show you how many citizens are harvesting each resource. I can't play other real-time strategy games anymore because they don't have a Citizen Manager. The war planning system in Empire Earth 2 is something that seems so obvious, but has been missing from every real-time strategy game out there. With the war planning system, you pull up a full-screen map and it's like a paint program. I choose a color which corresponds to the color of the team. I draw an arrow across the map. It shows exactly where they're supposed to come in from, where they're supposed to go. I can put X's down to say attack when you get there. I can type in text if I want. I send it to them and we both get the war plan on our mini-maps and shows us exactly where to go. What I found is every single time I use a war plan to coordinate my allies, we win that battle. In any real-time strategy game, one of my favorite moments is at the end of the game. I like to look at both the military scores and the economic scores, and in Empire Earth 2 I like to look at what we call the Imperial scores. But in most real-time strategy games, it's just a historical footnote. In Empire Earth 2, it happens in real time while you're playing the game. Once you've researched all the technologies related to a particular field, military, economic, or imperial, in a given epic, you're eligible to win that crown. And whoever has the highest score will get that crown. Getting a crown means you get a leader unit who has special powers related to that discipline. So a military unit leader may have the ability to create diversionary units. An economic leader will have the ability to buy buildings from the enemy. So you get these leaders with special abilities. You also get to choose a power for your civilization to use while you're in control of that crown. So when you win the military crown, you have the ability to choose, for instance, the strategic bombing doctrine, which will give you 5 minutes where your bombers are the most powerful on the map. It gives you new strategies, it gives you a reward, and it gives you an incentive to play the game in different ways. So if I'm playing against you and you've won the military crown, I'm going to start angling for the economic crown, so I'll get my leader and my bonus powers in order to counteract the way you're playing the game. In most real-time strategy games, the diplomacy consists of, I'm on your side, I'm not on your side. In Empire Earth 2, we've given a lot of options and we found that the diplomacy manager is getting a serious workout. And a lot of it comes out of a new mode we've put into both multiplayer and skirmish called Sole Survivor. In Sole Survivor, what happens is only one person can win the game. And what this does is it opens up all sorts of new diplomatic options. So for example, we can make an alliance for 5 minutes. And if we make an alliance for 5 minutes, it's an unbreakable alliance. We're not going to attack each other. But when 5 minutes are done, we're at war again. It makes a big difference when you're playing a game where you know only one person can win. It keeps you on the edge of your seat the whole time, and you're always angling for who you can ally with who will give you a boost right now, but you can really screw later. The territories are really the cornerstone for a lot of strategy in Empire Earth 2. I found that in a lot of real-time strategy games, you can just sit back in your base and build up and tech up, and then come storming out at the very, very end of the game. In Empire Earth 2, every map is divided up into different territories. Every territory can only support one city center, one university, one temple, a certain number of houses, a certain number of towers and outposts. So if you want to continue to grow your empire, you have to take additional territories. You can't just sit in your corner. And it also lets you know how you're doing compared to other players. So it gives you a very discrete set of goals to go after. It gives you a measure of how well you're doing. And it's something that helps simulate the way warfare has always played out. In Empire Earth 2, we are starting with a brand new engine. Every single line of code, every piece of art, every piece of design scripting, every line in the design document is brand new. We are starting from the ground up. We have built our engine on top of the core graphics libraries in Gamebryo, and we've built a brand new DirectX 9 graphics engine, AI engine, and game engine that's really not matched by any other engine out there.
In Empire 2, we're striving for realism across a variety of areas. And one of those is in representation of the world that you're in.
We've got really fantastic water effects with ripples on the water, reflections. We have all sorts of new smoke effects and explosions. We've got tracks for the vehicles, for the infantry, for the giant Hercs. We've got just stunning nuclear explosions. So this game has a lot of beauty in it that you haven't seen before.
The terrain that's represented in the world changes over time. We have a full seasonal model with a calendar that operates, that takes it through summer and fall and winter and spring again. Units have idle animations. If a unit is sitting there idle, we actually customize those animations based on the season you're in. So in the winter, you might have units that are sitting there shivering a bit while they're waiting around for orders, whereas in the summertime, they might wipe their brow because of the sweat.
We decided that we were going to put weather in the game, and it wasn't just an issue of adding some eye candy. We wanted it to affect gameplay. There are 3 different terrain types you can play games on in Empire Earth 2. There's temperate, there's tropical, and there's arid. And each one of these terrain types has a corresponding type of weather and severe weather. So in the temperate maps, you'll encounter snowstorms, but you can also encounter blizzards. In the tropical maps, you'll encounter rainstorms, but they can also turn into hurricanes. In the arid maps, you'll get sandstorms, and they can become very severe sandstorms. Every type of weather impacts the gameplay in a different way. So in the blizzards, your movement speed is reduced, and your line of sight is reduced. In the tropical rainstorms, not only is your line of sight reduced, but aircraft can't fly as well. They may be forced to return to their base, or they'll at least be jostled around and their attacks will be less effective. This means that you have to take that into account when you're playing the game. Now you can turn the weather off if you want to play that way, but when you have the weather on, it adds a certain variability to the maps and to the replayability that you really don't get in any other sort of game. And when you're launching a big attack and you realize it started raining and your planes aren't going to be able to carry out the attack, it's both more realistic and it's more fun. Empire Earth 2 has 3 single-player campaigns. They span the entire course of human warfare. The early campaign is set on the Korean Peninsula and is really focused on the establishment of Korea as a nation. It follows from the beginning Tangun, who was one of the first Korean leaders in his founding of the city of Asadal, all the way up through the time where it really achieved its first independence from China. The second campaign in the game spans the Middle Ages and is focused on the growth of Germany and the development of Germany from the Teutonic Knights up through the 1800s. The American campaign spans all of the modern warfare from World War I, World War II, and the Cold War even is covered in the American campaign. You'll see modern military equipment with airplanes, helicopters, nuclear missiles, and of course our Hercs in the future with a tie-in to the Earth Siege license. We have a couple of missions in Empire Earth 2 that we specifically call the Turning Point missions. They are very important historical battles with more set pieces and less of the building up of your resources and creating new units that had a big impact on the world, and they could have gone either way. One of the turning points is the invasion of Normandy, which you can play from either side. And it's a tough battle from each side of that map. Another one is a Chinese battle involving the Wu dynasty, and there are 2 different dynasties that can end up winning this battle and setting the tone for all of China in the future. The artificial intelligence in Empire Earth 2 is designed to give you the best opposition that you've ever experienced in a real-time strategy game.
But it will, evaluate the situation and make the best decisions based on what you're doing as a player. So 2 different players coming into the game are going to have a different experience.
When you have artificial intelligence that doesn't play by the rules, the strategies that are applicable against human players are not applicable, and playing against the AI isn't as fun. In Empire Earth 2, all of the basic strategies you can use against a player are viable against the AI, and it will use them against you.
And I think we've really accomplished something great because, if you're an observer in the game and you're watching the AI, you'll say, hey, he's doing it, playing the game just like a person does. He's gathering the resources, he's building up his army, and, hopefully you can't even tell which one's a human and which one's the computer.
From cutting off your resources, to launching big attacks, to trying to tech up faster than you, it's not cheating. We actually have to give it handicaps to allow the beginning players to be able to play against it. It's a very capable opponent, and it should provide endless replayability. The scenario editor in Empire Earth 2 ships with every copy of the game. Any user can go in and make maps using the very same tool that we used. We also have exposed to the user all of the data files that allow them to modify units, modify their strengths. You can even add new units into the game if you create some nice artwork. And we fully expect there to be a lot of mods for this game. Multiplayer is a big part of Empire Earth 2 and the real-time strategy experience overall. There's a lot of different multiplayer modes we have in the game. There's 9 different types of games you can play, and then there's dozens and dozens of other options you can use to modify the gameplay experience if you want to. For over a year now, every single day at 4 o'clock, we play a multiplayer game.
And we get together and talk about what went right, what went wrong, and what we can do to improve the game. When you get a game of the scale of Empire Earth 2 and the variety of units there are on it, one of the challenging things is literally just to balance them.
We have a system called the Auto Balancer that we run constantly, which creates different battles envisioned with one type of unit against another type of unit, and it actually measures the cost effectiveness of each type of unit against every other type. We make sure that no one unit is the trump card, that if you build this, you don't have to use your strategy and your thought to play the game. There has been more balancing effort put into this game than I've ever seen in any game before, and we think that the final product is a masterpiece of balance. One of the features I'm most proud of in the multiplayer Empire Earth 2 experience is Quick Start. It lets you choose from a number of different options, whether you want to have an economic, a military, or a balanced type of base, and whether you want to be aggressive or defensive or balanced within that, and it will automatically lay down buildings and start you with units. So you can jump into the game, start fighting, and you can have a 15 or 20 minute real-time strategy multiplayer experience, which has never been possible before. Of course, Empire Earth 2 has your standard conquest type modes in multiplayer, locked teams, team conquest. We also have modes such as hotspot, where different spots will appear around the map that you have to build a fortress on top of, and you have to hold a certain number of them for a certain amount of time. There's King of the Hill mode. There's territory control modes where you have to have a certain number of the territories on the map under your control. The Sole Survivor mode can be applied to any number of these other modes where only one person is allowed to win the game. And that's the most dynamic mode out there, because the best player isn't always on the winning team, because everybody realizes as soon as you get ahead that you have to hit that person back down. By making it so only one person can win the game if you choose the Sole Survivor option, the dynamics and the replayability have just gone through the roof. One of the interesting questions whenever you design a game, and especially a real-time strategy game, is are you designing it for the people who take their time, or are you designing it for the people who go out there and click really fast and want battles right away? And to be honest, there are days when I want slow, and there are days when I want fast, and there are days where I want a fast game followed by a slow game. What we did with Empire Earth 2 was we have our favorite settings for the pace of the game that is the default setting. But there's also a slow pace version and a fast pace version. And what it does is it affects things such as the rate at which you gather resources, the amount of damage dealt by units. So in a fast paced game, resources come in faster, units cost less, units move quicker across the map, and they do more damage.
We also have the slow pace settings where you gather slower, the units move a little slower, and you have more time to think about everything, and it becomes a more strategic game and less, throwing your troops at each other. Both modes are fun, they're just a different gameplay experience.
It really has given us the ability to make Empire Earth 2 not just span all of time and all of modern combat, but all of the tastes of the player.